Allah says in Surah Hujurat verse 13, O mankind, indeed we have created you from male and female, and made you peoples and tribes that you may know one another. Indeed, the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you. Indeed, Allah is knowing and acquainted. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today, me, Ummu Mursyidah binti Muhamad, and my groupmate Siti Norbayani and Nursuhaila will present to you our topic, Racism Leads to Disharmony in Malaysia. The pictures shown just now are several cases related to ethnic issues, particularly racism. Sadly, this indicates that racism issues are still circulating around us and can be manipulated by some people that will lead to disharmony in our country, since every ethnic is struggling to protect their own identity. So, because of the cases shown before, we firmly believe that disharmony in Malaysia is due to provocation, educational system, and income inequality. So, we move to the first point, which is racism leads to disharmony due to provocation. Before we discuss further about this point, we need to know first what is the definition of provocation that related to this point. According to Cambridge Dictionary, provocation is action or statement that is intended to make someone angry. There is also another definition of provocation by Merriam-Webster, that is the act of provoking or incitement. It is also defined as something that provokes, arouses, or stimulates. So based on these definitions, we can conclude that provocation is something which causes anger by the act of provoking or inciting someone using action or statement deliberately. Apart from that, the lack of tolerance and respect for each other simply occurs because of the anonymity in social media that helps increase free speech carelessly and immorally without seeing the consequences of it. As if one hateful comment was posted on social media, it surely will be easily spread and influence readers. To make it even worse, people tend to easily believe what was shown, told, and shared on social media without reconfirming it first. Therefore, it is essential and a must for an individual to check the news beforehand, whether it is true or false, and also what is the consequences before sharing it to others. Next, one of the reasons why the provocation may happen is due to the lack of respect for each other, especially in commenting on certain issues. According to Manoharan and Pichen 2020, netizens nowadays are daring enough to voice negative views or opinions on sensitive issues freely, so they had suggested that the government needs to enforce the existing law on freedom of speech, particularly in hate speech and racial statements in social media. Now let's go to the examples. There are two examples that I want to share with you. The first one is on the 13th of May 1969 riot that has led to 196 deaths with 439 injured and 9,143 were arrested, and many assume the numbers are actually higher than this as reported by Migrant Reports 1969. Summarily, in this riot, according to a report based on Foreign and Commonwealth Office FCO, there were two parades which took place aggravated the conflict. The first part of parade that was held on 9th of May 1969 before the election day, and the second part was after the day of the election, which were on 11th of May and 12th of May to celebrate the victory by Chinese parties. These parades were not ordinary parades, instead they were parades and provocations against the Malays. Then, on the night of 13th of May, groups of Malays planned counter-demonstration and parade around Kuala Lumpur. As a result, it became the trigger to the riot between groups of the Malays and the Chinese. The second example is the Addict case. Although the Selangor police chief has asserted that this issue was about relocation of the temple and it was not related to racial issues, but the negative comments on social media somehow encouraged and resulted in provocations towards certain ethnic. According to a study by Manoharan and Pichen 2020 on freedom of speech and netizens' comments on the issue of Muhamad in Berita Harian Online, it was found that there were 421 of 602 negative comments such as sarcasms, insults and incitement, which were the majority comments in that section of the media platform. So we can see that the state of hatred towards one another can happen and trigger others easily, especially when it involves the sensitive issues. So if there is no control of this situation by higher authorities of this case, it will lead to another unintended incident.
The second factor which causes disharmony in Malaysia is due to discrimination in the educational system in Malaysia. To be specific, due to vernacular schools in Malaysia. It is a school which they believe to promote a culture-based education, as the establishment was because of their fear of losing their cultural identity and use of mother tongue in national school. Sanusi Osman, 1986, once said in his book Ikatan Etnik dan Kelas di Malaysia, the division between ethnics through education causes limited and scarce interaction between students of different ethnics, as cited in Yasmin Ahmad and Najma Muhammad Yusof, 2010, page 83. Having this kind of vernacular schools or different system of education, such as national school, Chinese vernacular schools, and Indian vernacular schools, is unwittingly worrying. Plus, it was like our country is still abide by the British's idea to split and lessen the relation and communication between different races in our country, as mentioned by Yasmin Ahmad and Najma Muhammad Yusof, 2010. While the fact that to reach unity among all Malaysians, it should start early and specifically at schools, because students spend most of their time at school. Just like killing two birds with one stone, students go to school for the sake of education, but at the same time, they are able to learn to socialize with others from other races and build the social bond there. We see different race or belief or faith should not be the reason which stop us to abolish vernacular schools and oblige children to go to national school, since many non-Chinese parents have opted to send their children to Chinese vernacular school nowadays. It is genuinely not about what type of school the parents send their children to, but it is about where their children may get a quality education from. In this case, few parents viewed that Chinese vernacular schools are better. For example, Nur Fitri, as cited in Pakaran 2021, said that I've been told by other parents who send their children here that the quality of education is also good. Paragraph 8. That is why the government should focus more on how to build a quality education at school rather than building up more schools, which splitting the races in Malaysia. There is this one study by Professor Dr. Sharon Carstens. Surprisingly, the result of her study showed that Chinese are not paying attention to the usage of Malay language. Instead, they said Malay language is a parochial language which is only used to deal with the government, as cited in Saiful Bahri Kamaruddin, 2014. Referring to Merriam-Webster Online Dictionary, parochial here means narrow or limited. Hence, parochial language would mean a limited use language, meaning that those Chinese were saying that Malay language is not a widely used language. It can only be used in the country. That is why they were not concerned with the Malay language usage. It is totally saddening to know about this, isn't it? It is our official national language, our identity, and it represents our culture. You see, now this is the problem of vernacular schools in Malaysia. When students are not exposed to the essential of unity among races and not exposed to be socialized with other races, they will grow up with this kind of mindset. Malay language is not important. Indian should not be friends with Malay. Chinese and Indian are enemies, and etc. With regards with that, we viewed national school or one educational system such as Sekolah Wawasan might cure this problem and mindset, or at least will make them less prone to inter-ethnic clash and prejudice towards other races. Because just imagine if all students from all backgrounds, either Malay, Chinese, and Indian, studying under the same roof and playing on the same field, eating in the same canteen, having morning assembly under the same hall, that will be much more heartwarming and harmonious. As Yahya Don 2007 mentioned in his book, Kepimpinan Pendidikan di Malaysia, the concept of sekolah wawasan will allow students to learn to be tolerant towards one another, not only with the same races, but also other races as well. They will learn to build teamwork spirit, respect one another, and at last, when they grow up, they will not feel awkward or weird to be friends with other races.
Last but not least, income inequality is another factor that contributes to racism in Malaysia. The Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development (OECD) mentioned that income inequality is defined as the measurement of the gap of the distribution of income of the highest individuals or households with the income of the lowest individuals or households. Do you know that ethnic inequality has been found in Malaysia since the colonial era? According to Rebellion 2019, Malays were well suited working in paddy farming. Meanwhile, Chinese were dominating the mining sector and Indians mostly involved in cash crop plantation such as rubber. Muhamad Abdul Khalid and Young 2019 added that since Malaysia gained independence, Malay remain as the poorest group with the lowest average of income. For this reason, Ikemoto 1985 pointed out that the poverty rate for Malays was 71% as compared to 27% for Chinese and 36% for Indian at that time. This inequality gives opportunity for chaos to occur and channelize the social and political instability. Furthermore, Rebellion 2019 highlighted that these issues has not received much attention from the policymakers and it arose after decades. Hence, the Sino-Malay race riot was stimulated to happen in Kuala Lumpur in May 1969. There are numerous of efforts made by the government in order to distinguish the income inequality among ethnicities in Malaysia. One of them is the implementation of New Economic Policy (NEP) after the 13th May race riot. Rabiul Islam (ETAL) 2017 mentioned that the NEP was designated based on two major approaches, which is first, to narrow and also eliminate the poverty, and second, to amend the economic inequality by reorganizing society. But it seemed to have failed. This is aligned with the study conducted by Shahriza Ilyana Ramli ETAL 2013 stated that many of Bumiputra found themselves being discriminated even though the NEP was initially implemented to enhance their social development and economy. In addition, Muhammad Abdul Khalid 2011 argued that the Bumiputra remained as the poorest group although the NEP was believed to increase their asset of ownership. Even though there is a decrease in income inequality among ethnic groups, the wealth gap, especially between the Malay and also the Chinese, remains wide. Do you know that in order to measure income inequalities, the Gini coefficient method is used, as it shows the intuitive geometric interpretation of the income data? Muhammad Abdul Khalid 2011 revealed that the Gini coefficient data in 2007 showed the wealth inequalities among Indians was the highest, which is 0.559, followed by the Bumiputra 0.5103, while the lowest income inequality was among the Chinese, which is 0.4725. Obviously, these figures denied the voices of some critics that argued NEP as a pro-Bumiputera policy, because in present, this issue is still happening, as a research conducted by Muhammad Abdul Khalid and Young 2019 concluded that the decomposition of income growth by ethnicity and class shows that, on average, Malaysian Chinese are still much richer than Bumiputera or Malaysian Indians. As a conclusion, it is clear that racism stems from provocation, racial discrimination in education system, and income inequality that leads to disharmony in Malaysia. Even though there are many policies enforced by the government to overcome this issue, but the feeling of being discriminated against still arises among society members. There are many suggestions that can be implemented in order to overcome racism issue in Malaysia. First, by implementing the Barnes Report 1950, where Chinese and Tamil schools are abolished and stick to only one education system called the national school. Second, every race should be given equal chances in education and also career. Every hiring manager should accept different races in their company. Last but not least, government should design a transformation in the economic sector by shifting from race-based policy to need-based policy. Employers must stop hiring based on racial preference and should emphasize more on the skills and competency as the basic requirements. Islam is recognized by its holisticity in all aspects of life, including in the world and hereafter. And Islam does not recognize a person by differences such as physical, appearance, rank, descent, ethnicity, and colors. As Allah says in Surah Hujurat, verse 13, O mankind, indeed we have created you from male and female, and made you peoples and tribes, so that you may know one another. Indeed, the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you. Indeed, Allah is knowing and acquainted. Islam, since the very beginning, does not allow any form of racism and stipulated that human beings are being given equal treatment in all forms of responsibility, retribution, and legal rights. The act of loving and caring for the nation is not an offense, but Islam never allows extreme love and affection towards the nation by being cruel and discriminating other ethnicities or races. Because after all, humans are created by Allah as a caliph to prosper the earth by living in harmony. So that's all from us. Thank you for your attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.